recording. Okay. And then, Peter, I would give you the word to welcome us to this seminar on adaptive management. So much. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you. Good morning. And on behalf of the Swedish Agency for Marine and Water Management, I would like to welcome everybody to this second seminar regarding improved management of marine protected areas in the Western Indian Ocean. I hope that we during this seminar will be able to continue to exchange recent experiences and to address and discuss some of our key challenges identified in the Outlook report. And hopefully we will also be able to work out specific proposals and new project ideas using this adaptive management system. We will try to focus on appropriate methods to reach out to all different stakeholders in the region. And we are all, and then I'm thinking of all these people, local communities that are dependent on well-managed and productive marine and coastal ecosystems. And considering the very huge challenge to deliver now on SDG 14, and especially on 14.5, the target to reach at least 10% of protected coastal and marine areas. But I also have a strong feeling that this is really the right time now in the Western Indian Ocean region to really analyze the present situation and to agree on the most necessary actions in the region to improve the management systems. And I would also like to say that the ongoing climate change will also need to be discussed, and specific mitigation measurements needs to be worked out. And another important aspect is to agree on the approaches we need to use in order to really involve all relevant stakeholders in the decision process now, and to establish new protected areas, which also could contribute to the development of sustainable fisheries in the region. Increased networking between managers and exchange of our new knowledge regarding effective methods to use in different types of marine and coastal protected areas are some of the expected outcomes that we have from this seminar. And I'm especially looking forward to participate in this discussion session. And so I hope we will have a very successful seminar, and I welcome you all. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Peter. I would give the floor now to Jared to please welcome us and give us a bit of context on this session today. Thanks, Jared.
Thanks, Xavier. Can you please take down your...
I will, sure.
Yeah. Presentation. I will just have my picture just for a moment. I mean my photo. Colleagues, good morning and good to have you here. And on behalf of the convention, I would like to welcome you. Good seeing so many colleagues, MPA practitioners. I'm also happy to even see another colleague from South Africa, Judy Mann, who has a lot of passion in communicating work around MPAs. So I will put off my camera for now. And I try to share my screen. Colleagues, I'm going to give you a quick presentation on the MPA Outlook that was recently launched in July. The training that we have today was one of the major recommendations from the Outlook. So, okay. Sabe, you may confirm that you can see my screen, right?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Excellent. The challenge I normally have is that when I'm transitioning between slides, they get stuck. So if you say, should you see that my slides are not moving, kindly let me know. So colleagues, welcome.
Jared, one second. We are actually seeing your the presenter's view. We see the next slide, so we don't see it full screen.
Okay, let me try to do that again. Okay, so as I try to share the, let me put it on slideshow. Sometimes it misbehaves, but I hope it works. Is it okay now?
Now we see the editing mode, and we see you up to clicking slideshow.
Okay, because on my end it's on slideshow, so I'm going to exit slideshow and put it on editing mode. That is the problem that I normally have, but I hope that it will be clear. So colleagues, I'm going to make a short presentation on the MPA outlook that was recently developed as a collaboration between the Nairobi Convention and the Western Indian Ocean region. And the major objective of developing this outlook was to support the contracting parties to track the progress, contracting parties of the Nairobi Convention, to track the progress they have made on SDG 14.5, as Peter mentioned, which was that the governments were to conserve 10% of their EEZ by by 2020. But this outlook also serves as a baseline for the post-2020 global biodiversity framework target of 30 by 30. That means nations conserving 30% of the EEZ by 2030, a very ambitious target. We are hoping that the next CPT COP will be able to confirm this. The contracting parties gave a mandate to or instructions to the Secretariat to develop two outlooks, a marine protected areas outlook, which I'm presenting here, that is completed and launched. But we are also in the process of finalizing a critical habitats outlook for the region. That will be launched either towards the end of the year or next year. The outlook has, this is the structure for the outlook. It has preliminary sections, but part one of the outlook deals with the structure, purpose, and methodology. Part two deals with the context of the outlook. Part three has the country chapters for the MPAs, in different countries. Part four deals with the management effectiveness. And part five is a synthesis or a summary on the progress made in the region on countries meeting the targets under 14.5. The slide here shows the cover pages for the country chapters, beautifully well done. You can see all the different countries indicated here. And there are also a number of illustrated case studies within the outlook. You will see the Mihari network of LLMS in Madagascar, for instance, the Seychelles Marine Spatial Planning, among other case studies which are illustrated in the outlook. And the outlook is available online on the Nairobi Convention website or WIMSA. You can actually be able to get the details, the whole outlook. There are also maps for all MPAs for each country that are a part of the country chapters. This is just a demonstration of the maps of Madagascar, Mozambique, and the Tanzania mainland. These are up-to-date maps, and we think that the information that has been provided in the outlook is the most up-to-date information on MPAs that you can get for the MPAs of the region. What were the key findings of the outlook? The whole region has 143 MPAs, covering just about 550,000 square kilometers. And this represents 7% of the total EEZ for the region. And one of the very interesting finding was that 63% of the spatial extent of these MPAs were actually brought under protection between 2015 and 2020, which was during the SDG regime, which means that the SDG framework enhanced the momentum by governments of bringing more areas under protection. It was also interesting to note that legislative and institutional frameworks that support the establishment and management of MPAs exist in all countries, meaning there's political goodwill for countries to establish and manage MPAs And the role of communities was also demonstrated through LLMAs or CMAs, as they may be called differently depending on the country. An MPA effectiveness assessment was conducted for 101 MPAs. This was quite extensive, using a number of relevant indicators. Some of them are highlighted here. What we have in green are the indicators where best practice is being met. And you can see on legal status, many countries are doing very well, meaning they have legislation to actually establish and manage MPAs. Blue means minimum standards are achieved, but gaps still exist. When you go to yellow, or is it orange, that indicates that some effort is being made, but there are significant gaps that exist. And where you had red, that meant that there's no evidence that this indicator has been met, or there's poor performance on this, on this indicator. So as you can see here, it's a mixed bag in terms of the performance of MPAs across the region. But one of the most important observations was that there exists legislation and institutional frameworks for the management of MPAs. This figure here is the same demonstration. Where major weaknesses were observed was that there was limited infrastructure, including equipment maintenance, limited staff capacity, limited research, limited community participation in the management of gazetted MPAs, among other challenges. And this will form the key recommendations that were given as a result of these observations. Now, some of the threats that were found to be significantly impacting on MPAs across the region, top in the graph here is climate change, which Peter mentioned here a short while ago, but also the socioeconomic levels in adjoining areas where poverty levels were high. That became a challenge in the management of MPAs. Also, illegal extraction of resources, among other threats which were observed. Some of the key challenges, which some have mentioned already: weak enforcement and compliance, inadequate financial and personnel capacity. I've listed that. Climate change and pollution as key threats, and also increased footprint of coastal developments. Some key recommendations have been given, some of which we are actually addressing through this capacity building workshop today. The need to ensure sustainable financing to support equipment, infrastructure, acquisition, skilled personnel, and effective enforcement. The need to strengthen law enforcement and compliance. The need to invest in education and awareness programs. There was a recommendation to establish a regional framework for MPA capacity building in the region. And this partnership between the convention, WIOMSA, and SwAM is already addressing this recommendation, because we now have this ongoing capacity building program, which was started on the 24th of June, and today is the second webinar. So this training is a recommendation from this outlook as well. There was also a recommendation to establish a MPA network, and this has been established already, and the MPA practitioners, managers who are here are part of this network. A very interactive dashboard has been produced. There's a regional dashboard of MPAs that is interactive. You can access it on the Nairobi Convention Clearinghouse. And the dashboard gives a number of very, very important metrics. I will encourage you to visit the website for you to appreciate, how much information is available in very interesting graphics. It gives you even number of MPAs, spatial extent at the regional level. But if you click on any flag of the countries indicated here, you will get details on MPAs for each country under different metrics. When they were established, how many they are, the current management regimes, institutions managing these MPAs, among other metrics. So colleagues, I would like to end it here. And once again, welcome you to the training for today. If you want the details of the MPA Outlook, you can access this on the WIOMSA website or the Nairobi Convention website. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jared, for this very brief presentation of this incredible work that was the Outlook, where WIOMSA was a very key part, but many people on the region were contributing to compiling and as you say, have for the first time all this information available in this very useful tool, the dashboards and the resource center that it's on the clearinghouse of the convention. So congratulations again for this incredible work to all of you. Just to summarize, I will present quickly the agenda today. That should be the right screen. Yeah, the aim of this seminar, as Jared was saying, was trying to provide inspiration to address one of these key challenges that was identified during the Outlook report, and it's how to ensure stakeholder engagement into the designation of MPAs, but also the management of MPAs, because we have problems, as we said, of compliance. We have problems about using of resources in a non-coordinated way. We've got even problems of boundaries not being known, and all this is listed in the Outlook report. So to provide this inspiration, we will bring today 3 cases. One from Madagascar that Batosoa will present in a few seconds. Another one from Seychelles. Elena will introduce us to this experience and how they managed to engage stakeholders in this marine spatial planning initiative. And finally, one case from Sweden as well, with a few interesting bits and things that we hope will inspire participants today with approaches and potential ways to address this big challenge. By the end, we expect to have around 50 minutes of discussion. So we hope to have your participation and your thoughts, so we can discuss a bit about what was presented today and how this can be applied to your reality. And then the last 5 minutes, we will do some conclusions and last remarks, also sources of information in case you are interested in continuing these lines of thought. So with further ado, I would just pass the floor to Batosoa to present, and maybe I think you should be sharing your screen to introduce us to the case in Madagascar. Thanks in advance for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Xavier, and hello everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah,
yes,
yeah. So thanks a lot for inviting. Thanks a lot for inviting me, Harry, and inviting me to present the case of LMMA in Madagascar. So my name is Vatsu, and I am an advocate for indigenous and local community conservation efforts. I've been working for the Mihai network as national coordinator for 6 years. And I am today the president of the board of the Mihai network, and I'm still working on with Madagascar small-scale fisheries. So just to start, as we know, the concept of LMMA was developed in the Pacific and in Asia in the 90s for the case of Madagascar. The concept of LMMA was born in the southwest of the island, with the communities coming together to manage community-led octopus closures. So when the other communities saw the success of those octopus closures, they started to develop the same concept. So this is how the approach and the concept of LMMA has been developing in our country. So the definition of LMMA is it is an area of nearshore waters and its associated coastal and marine resources that is largely or only managed at the local level by the coastal communities. So it is an area where we put the communities in the center of management. For the case of Madagascar, we have about 2 types of LMMA in Madagascar. The first one is those who have support from NGOs. So I see that we have lots of NGO members of Mihari here, like WCS, Conservation International. And we have a second type of LMMA who are independent LMMA, emerging LMMA, which means that they do not have the support from NGOs, but they are still managing, they are still able to do conservation works. And in terms of the governance structures and governance mechanism, we have 3 types of governance mechanism, 3 types of LMMA. The first one is LMMA that are marine protected area. We also have LMMA that use the bylaw convention, which is called the DINA. It is the bylaw local convention that community use to manage natural resources And the last one is LMMA, who are located in mangrove area. So we have a national law called laws, which govern those mangrove areas in Madagascar. So those are the 3 types of LMMA in Madagascar. And as you can see in this map, about 11 of the 13 coastal regions of Madagascar are now covered by LMMA, which means that they are expanding a lot, and we have more LMMA than MPA today. For the number, the member inside the Mihai network, we now have about 219 LMMA communities, and they cover more than 17,000 square kilometers of Madagascar's continental shelf. And as regarding to small-scale fisheries, we have more than 500,000 small-scale fisheries in Madagascar. So LMMA is different to small-scale fisheries, but most of the small-scale fisheries in Madagascar are integrated into LMMA associations. Regarding the management model of LMMA in Madagascar, we have 4 management models. The first one is that we empower those LMMA communities to create temporary and permanent fisheries closures like octopus or lobsters and so on. And then we also empower them to restore mangroves. For the 2 remaining ones, they are empowered to develop alternative livelihoods such as aquaculture. So they do not have to rely only on the marine resources. And finally, they are empowered to create and develop local regulations, such as bans on the destructive fishing practices. And then all of the communities members of the village should respect those local regulations. Regarding the impact of LMMA in Madagascar, so we have identified 4 impacts for the socio-economic well-being. We saw an improved food security, income and saving, and social investment, such as access to water, access to education. And for the fisheries management, we have seen also an increased fisheries production through no-take zones and the regulated fishing gears. Regarding the ecology and biology, we have seen an improvement of marine and coastal ecosystems, such as mangrove, seagrass, coral reef, and various species. And finally, for governance, we have seen promoting community participation and decision-making in the sustainable management of marine and coastal areas, such as the creation of management committees. So we can see that LMMA are efficacy, and they have impact not only in terms of biology, but also in social economic, in ecology, in governance, and especially in the behavior change of those communities who are integrated into those LMMA. Unfortunately, those LMMA are facing challenges, such as the conflict in resource use. As you know, we have that area where we can have 2 users at the same area. Here we can see industrial fisheries and small-scale fishers. So there is that conflict in resource use and allocation. As I said, we had our first LMMA in 2004, but until today, there is still no legal framework that recognizes the rights of those LMMA in Madagascar. They are also isolated and located in remote areas, which means that those communities do not have any opportunity to exchange between them, to peer-to-peer learning, and to share the challenges. They are not heard. So that is why the Mihai network was created in 2012, which is an initiative of community. And it was actually 18 LMMA associations in the Southwest that came together to create a network that will represent their voices, will defend their rights, and also will allow them to exchange between them and do peer-to-peer learning. So what Mihai is doing, what the network is doing, is to advocate for small-scale fisheries rights, to build the capacity of those local communities in terms of leadership, public speaking, association management, and so on. And also the Mihai network is organizing events that allow those communities to share, to exchange, and to learn from each other. So those events are called national forum or exchange visits and national workshop of fishers. So the Mihai network was created in 2012, and it got independent in 2020. So what we do inside MIHARI is we strengthen the voices of those local communities inside LMMA. We help them to meet people. As I said, they are located in remote areas. So through MIHARI, they have the opportunity to travel, to leave their village and meet ministries or government people to share about what they are facing. We also help those communities to replicate best practices. So in this image, we can see it is at MIHARI Forum in 2015 during the opening of Octopus Fishing Reserve. And we also develop environmental awareness and education for those communities. And as I said, we allow peer-to-peer learning between them. So here we have LMMA leader and expert on mangrove restoration who is sharing with his peer about like what are the techniques, what are the tips that can be used by others. Regarding the impact of MIHARI, based on what MIHARI has done, small-scale fishers in Madagascar now have a strong voice in determining the policy that affect them. LMMA leaders are demonstrating a greater confidence using the voices and participating in dialogue. And the LMMA concept has much greater level of recognition and is integrated into a policy. So we are now in the process actually to advocate for that LMMA text that recognize the rights of those communities. In terms of the opportunities that I wanted to share, we also have actually, as in 2017, the communities have drafted a motion to the government funders for formalization of DINA, which is the bylaw convention that they are using to be formalized at the national level. They have also requested regulation of fishing gears, like most of the communities here use mosquito nets, so they have requested like cheaper fishing gear, so they do not use the harmful one. And the last one is they requested the creation of a reserved area for small-scale fishers on the coastal strip. They are all now in the process to be progress. So that is what I wanted to present today about LMMA. So I'm happy for any questions that you may have about LMMA. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Batosu, and sorry for not pronouncing your name correctly the first time.
Okay.
That was
okay.
I'm sorry about that. That was a very excellent presentation, really quick, full of very interesting ideas and thoughts. I wonder if participants have attendants have any clarifying question for you. We've got some minutes for that. I have to say it was quite impressive. Yeah. If anyone has a question, yeah, Ulrika is raising her hand. Please go ahead. We can also use the chat if you want to put your questions there, and we will read them. We will read them to Batosu. Thanks, Ulrika.
Thank you so much for an excellent and very comprehensive, but still fast and good overview of the work of MIHARI, and it seems very impressive. I just wanted to understand a little bit. You said that you're looking for formalization of this form of LMMAs and also for the network, I guess. How do the LMMAs currently work with local government? How much is it? You mentioned that some of them are independent and some of them are supported by NGOs, but what is the role of government in these LMMAs?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Ulrika, for your question. Yeah, so actually we do not have local government inside LMMA. Sometimes we have, for example, the chief of village, because LMMA is not only for small-scale fishers. Like anyone that are interested to manage the area, the resources are allowed to integrate LMMA and respect the charter or the social contracts that the members are elaborating. So it depends, but I say that we are in the process to formalize LMMA because, as I said, for now we are using the definition of LMMA from the Pacific. For Madagascar, we do not have yet our own definition. So recently, based on the advice from the government to make a progress on that text, they've requested that we give Malagasy name for LMMA in Madagascar. So that happened in 2020. And the network also got independent in October 2020. So it got a local Malagasy name for LMMA, and the network got also independent as a Malagasy local association in 2020. So which means that there is going to be progress about that text. As I said, I'm not sure if when you say local government or you were talking about local authorities, but yeah, there is a collaboration. As I said, like MIHARI is organizing national forums and also local forums, like regional forums, which means that we try, when it is at the national, at the local level or regional level, we try to invite those local authorities to attend those events. And I would like to mention that today we also have members of MIHARI. So I'm within the board of MIHARI. We also have members of MIHARI Secretariat. So do not hesitate if you have anything to add, because very soon there is going to be another Congress of MIHARI in October, where we will cover then local authorities and where they have the opportunity to listen about what are the challenges of the LMMA inside the region, how can the local government support them, how can they be recognized with what they are challenging and what they are doing. Yeah.
Thanks, Batosu. We also have another question from Judy Mann. Please.
Thank you so much. Thanks for a really interesting presentation. You sped through a lot of information, and it was really worthwhile to listen. And I think really helping us from a South African perspective, look at the potential of locally managed areas. The question I have pertains to the impact of the change in behavior on the fishing resources. So have you explored the impact of the behavior change on the actual resources? Are you seeing increases in abundance, changes in perhaps composition of the resources that the fishermen have been targeting because of their change in behavior?
Yeah,
sorry, was that clear?
Yeah, I think I understood it. Thank you. Yeah, actually, as I've presented, we evaluated the impact. It was not really to say that a national study, but just a kind of informal evaluation of the impact. And we saw that there was a behavior change into the communities. Like they have more ownership of the area. They are more concerned in surveillance and control. They are more motivated when they know that they are inside an association. They are the guardians of that area. We see that they are more concerned about infractions and implementing the law and the local regulations. So I'm not sure if I understand too well the question. We do not have yet an evaluation of the stock. Like if there was a behavior change, can we see that the stock was at best like individual LMMA? Like me, I was doing some interviews with communities for another study. So like they say that before they joined LMMA, like they have X kilos of octopus per opening closures, but know that they have LMMA, it can go up to 7 tons or 6 tons per year. So that's in terms of the catch, we can see that there is a change also in terms of mangrove restoration, mangrove size. Since they are empowered to restore mangroves, there is that behavior change where they know that they need to protect the area that they have been restoring. Then for example, recently in 2017 or 18, I think, we have communities that restored 2 hectares, restores mangrove in the Northwest. And then there was a Chinese company that cut 2 hectares of the mangrove to build like a aquaculture firm. So those communities asked MIHARI to support them to raise the case. And then we had support from the government to remove that. So that is what I mean. Like there is a behavior change, and they know that they need to protect what they have been restoring. So yeah, that's the kind of behavior change that was happening.
Judy says, thanks, Batosu, and very good answer. She's nodding. I guess that's a very good case of how to engage stakeholders and how to co-manage areas. Tina is also adding on the chat box that there's not a formal recognition in place yet, but you're working on that. But I guess practically on site, I mean, the network and the LMMAs are an actual actor and a force in place, even if there's no formal recognition. Is that true, Batosu? What's what be recognized officially?
I don't really understand the message of Tina, but what I can say is maybe, yeah, like LMMA, there is no official, like there is no legal framework that recognizes LMMA yet in Madagascar. But for Mihari no is a formal independent organization, which have a status from 2020. And yeah, we were know that the Ministry of Fisheries has been separated from, like it's not an independent body. So yeah, we are in the process actually. Like we met with the Ministry of Fisheries like two weeks ago. He met with a few actors, and then that discussion about how to officially recognize LMMA through a text. How can we make progress on working on that? So that's the plan now for now, like for this year, hopefully.
Well, thanks. I think at this point we could move on to the next presentation. Thanks again, Batosu, for all these and covering the answers. In the discussion section, we will also have opportunities to go into details and see what of these ideas maybe can be transferable to other regions or in the West Indian Ocean section. I would like to invite now Elena Sims from TNC to share your screen and explain the case study of marine spatial planning in Seychelles and how these converge with this challenge on how to engage stakeholders in the end into better designation, but also obviously better management of our resources. Thanks in advance, Elena, for your time, for joining us and explaining the case today. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Xavi, and good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me and the Seychelles for providing an overview of the Marine Spatial Plan. I hope it's okay. My bandwidth is not very good today, so unfortunately I have to keep my camera off. And I'm just about to share the presentation now. Please let me know if you can hear me okay and if you can see the presentation.
Yes, Elena, we hear you very well and we can see your editing mode on the presentation.
Yes.
So
just give me 1 second. How is it now? Is it okay?
Perfect. Yeah, we see the presentation. Thanks.
Thank you. And thank you very much to Madagascar for the interesting presentation. Seychelles is also currently piloting an LMMA. I see my colleagues from SPGA, the Seychelles Parks and Gardens Authority, are here today. So I'm sure they might have some further questions later on for you. But today I am here in my capacity as the Seychelles Marine Spatial Plan Project Manager to present an overview of the Seychelles Marine Spatial Plan. I'm currently working with the Nature Conservancy, and the Nature Conservancy facilitates on behalf of the government of Seychelles. Just trying to move to the next slide, that it seems computer is frozen. Bear with me, please.
Maybe going back to the editing mode could help. We can also see it from there, if that's easier.
Okay.
Sometimes they rebel, these machines.
Nope. Sorry. Let me try again.
Sure.
Okay.
Now we see it. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe you can maximize and
Yeah. Can you see the slides? Okay.
Yes. Yes, we can. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So just a little bit of context. I'm sure a lot of you already know this, but the Seychelles is a small island developing state. We have a very large ocean area of 1.35 million square kilometers, and we have 115 islands. But of all the islands combined, we just have over 450 square kilometers of land, which means we can also be described as a large oceanic state. We also have a very small population of 90,000 people, or just over 90,000 people now. And we are in a biodiversity hotspot in the Western Indian Ocean with over 700 species on the IUCN Red List. And we also have 2 UNESCO World Heritage Sites in the Seychelles, and we are recognized for being in a global biodiversity hotspot. The economy of the Seychelles also is based primarily on fisheries and marine tourism, which are the 2 main contributors to the GDP. Through the marine spatial planning, we're also looking at addressing the blue economy strategy and objectives of the Seychelles, but also addressing existing threats and potential future threats. Threats at the onset of the MSP in 2014 included threats from piracy, illegal, unregulated, and unreported fisheries, and climate change. So one of the most widely accepted definitions of marine spatial planning is from the IOC UNESCO 2009 step-by-step approach to ecosystem-based management. And the Seychelles has adopted this definition for the Seychelles Marine Spatial Plan. And it basically is that MSP, or marine spatial planning, is a public process, so stakeholder driven, of analyzing and allocating spatial and temporal distribution of human activities in marine areas. And this is one of the most important things that have come across from marine spatial planning in Seychelles compared to MPA network expansion, in that you're trying to balance not only ecological or biodiversity objectives, but also the social and economic objectives. So considering existing users and how to work with these users to develop the zoning design. And that the marine spatial plan process initiative is specified through a political process. So for the Seychelles, the government leads on the MSP, with TNC acting as a facilitator of the process. These are some of the benefits of marine spatial planning. We might all be aware of the first one, which is protecting habitats and species for ecosystem resilience services and climate change adaptation. But marine spatial planning also has other benefits, such as addressing spatial conflicts amongst existing and future users. We saw an example of that in the previous presentation, where you have different users in the same area. You also have the benefit of having decision guidance for future activities by planning for existing and future uses, and also improve decision-making and buy-in with stakeholders, because it is a stakeholder-driven process. So for the Seychelles, environmental concerns are firmly entrenched in our constitution. And Seychelles, as you may recall, was one of the first countries in the region to designate a marine protected area in 1973, which is the Saint-Anne Marine National Park. But realizing the importance of the ocean to the people of Seychelles, in 2012, at the Rio+20 United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development, Rio+20, the Republic of Seychelles made a commitment to increase marine protections from the then 0.04% protection to 30% by 2020. This commitment was made in 2012, and it was long before today's more stringent commitment of 30% by 2030. This commitment was made conditional to raising funds for marine conservation And from it emerged the Blue Economy vision for the Seychelles and the Marine Spatial Plan initiative, which was launched in 2014. So from this 2012 commitment, we have the Marine Spatial Plan and the objectives of the Marine Spatial Plan. And then the Seychelles finalized the first depth for climate adaptation swap for a marine area, which was to the value of just over $21 million US. And then the creation of the Seychelles Conservation and Climate Adaptation Trust, SECAT, which manages the proceeds of the debt conversion and also provides funding for the Marine Spatial Plan and implementation as we move into the implementation phase. So the milestones, the MSP had 3 milestones to transition from a 0.04% marine protection area to 30% by 2020. And these different milestones were written in the debt swap loan agreement and can be considered as one of the drives for the Seychelles Marine Spatial Plan, because what it meant was if we did not meet a particular milestone at a particular date, the Seychelles would then default on the loan agreement. So Seychelles has met all these milestones, and I will go through the zoning design shortly. But this is just an example of a phased approach in marine spatial planning, so that you don't, one, shock the system and go from less than 1% to 30% in a year. So these milestones were written in the loan agreement from 2014 to 2020 with different targets every 2 years that were to be met, from core scale planning, deep water, and then transitioning to shallow water areas with finer scale planning. At the onset also, you have to define who are your key stakeholders in the marine realm or in the scope of the marine spatial plan that is being developed. For the Seychelles, this is quite not an easy task. It's such a very large area. But this is a summary slide of the key stakeholders that were engaged from the onset, from fisheries to tourism, infrastructure, conservation. Enforcement was also included because there were discussions about implementation and control, monitoring, and surveillance from the onset, and how the zoning design would assist in implementation and sustainable financing, for example. We also have non-renewable energy included, renewable energy, and then of course the public with civil society organizations represented. These developing the guiding principles, these were done at the onset 2014 and 2015 by different technical working groups. So the stakeholders themselves developed these guiding principles on what they wanted this marine spatial plan to mean in terms of how would the governance and management approach be, as well as what are the approaches to the marine spatial planning that they would like to see. Some of the key components for the Seychelles MSP here is that they wanted to use existing national laws and regulations and policies, so as much as possible not to reinvent the wheel. Transparency, inclusivity, and participation. So the minutes of the meetings are on the MSP website, say msp.com, for example, to have considerations of integration and co-management in the implementation of these areas. Equity came up a lot, as well as sustainable development. In terms of the approach, using ecosystem-based adaptive management approaches to managing human activities. This would include 3 important elements: ecological integrity, human well-being, and governance. Also, there should be the precautionary principle applied if we don't know what's there and where the threats are. A lack of scientific certainty should not be used as a reason to postpone, for example, cost-effective measures. And then this is the balance of ecological, social, and economic and cultural objectives is in the definition that's been adopted. The plan needs to be feasible, practical, and implementable. So this needs to be thought of during the zoning design process itself, and where the boundaries are and whether it's feasible and practical, that the plan needs to be financially sustainable, adaptable. So if something is not working, there needs to be a review process of the plan further down the line with indicators, for example, and tracking system, and that the plan is at relevant temporal and spatial scale. So for the scope of the Seychelles, the Marine Spatial Plan itself is for the entire exclusive economic zone. Further to the guiding principles, we then needed to develop a governance framework on how processes and decisions would be made throughout the Marine Spatial Plan initiative. So we have different layers of decision-making processes, and it is led by being evidence-based with a decision-making framework that is transparent and includes over 100 representatives across 2 committees, an executive committee and a steering committee, and 7 technical working groups. We also have public stakeholder workshops, as well as one-to-one consultations. The MSP also briefs the Cabinet of Ministers and the members of the National Assembly. And as I mentioned before, the process is led by the government of Seychelles. For the MSP, it's led through the Ministry of Agriculture, Climate Change and Environment, with TNC as a facilitator of this process. So the Seychelles MSP is also knowledge-based. The scope of the planning is focused on 5 themes for activities within the EZ boundary. And to date, we have gathered and created spatial data for 4 main economic themes. And we also partnered with the government of Seychelles' UNDP-GEF Protected Areas project to compile more than 100 biodiversity layers. And the Seychelles MSP has used best available data that could be sourced nationally, regionally, and globally. And they're separated into 5 sector themes: fisheries, biodiversity, industrial and public utilities, non-renewable resources, and tourism and recreation. The data itself is attributed to a planning unit grid. That is, it's a systematic planning unit grid where all data are attributed to either 1 kilometer square or 50 kilometer square polygons in the marine realm or space, EZ of Seychelles, with shallow water being less than 200 meter depth and deep water being considered more than 200 meter depth. And this approach is important because it means that in the future, the data can be updated if we have new information, and that new analyses can also be conducted about, for example, the economic contribution of fisheries, for example, to the blue economy, and so on. So these are some of the key layers that we've used in the MSP. We've used deep sea floor geomorphology. And for example, this is one of the benefits of having the planning unit grid, in that we can have spatial temporal analyses. This is an example of one from industrial fisheries. So the next step was then to develop the zoning framework. The Seychelles MSP has 3 zones. Zone 1 is high biodiversity protection. Zone 2 is medium biodiversity protection and sustainable use. And then zone 3 is multiple use areas. So all the different zones have their framework that provides the direction. This framework, provides the direction to meet a 30% marine biodiversity protection goal, with zone 1 and zone 2 combined being the 30%, and then zone 3 multiple use being the remaining 70% of the marine EEZ. So each area in the zoning design has its objective, rationale, and an associated allowable activities table and management considerations. And these tables on allowable activities are developed using the stakeholder committees and working groups that I described earlier. So to date, from 2014, we have had more than 200 consultative meetings over the past 6 years. And since 2014, we have had extensive consultations with over 100 stakeholders participating in the MSP, sharing information and data, ground truthing maps and spatial layers, and developing draft outputs such as the allowable activities tables mentioned earlier. All these meetings are minuted with input that is then transferred into an advice log for reference. The minutes of the meetings can be found on the MSP website at www.saymsp.com. This slide is a summary of the areas that were gazetted in milestone 1 in 2018, which amounted to 15% of our EEZ, and then milestone 2 in 2019, with just about 26% of our EEZ. The Seychelles used the National Parks and Nature Conservancy Act to gazette these areas. Dark green areas are your zone 1, equivalent to no human extraction and no seabed alteration. So your high biodiversity areas. And then the light green areas are your zone 2, medium biodiversity and sustainable use. So you can allow some extraction, but there will need to be consideration of sustainability and addressed through the management plans and regulations for these areas. As you can see from these areas, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but shallow water areas were not zoned until the final milestone. So we started with deep water, and then based on implementation, control, monitoring, and surveillance, fewer larger areas are more feasible to implement and more cost effective. So when the areas were added here in this milestone 2, the entire areas were re-gazetted as 2 large blocks in consideration of implementation and enforcement in the future. And the next slide is the final milestone, which was reached in March. These areas were gazetted in March of 2020 and include 13 marine protection areas in the Seychelles with just over 30% marine protection. I would like to note that this full 30% is not in the MPA outlook because the designation was after, I think, the finalization of the outlook, but it can be updated. This information is on the MSP website, including the nomination file for the biodiversity in these areas, should you be interested to read up more about this. There are also other ongoing MSP activities that inform the Marine Spatial Plan process. For example, there's been a costing analysis that has been carried out to look at the different scenarios from passive to active management in Zone 1 and Zone 2 and how much that would cost. There is a note there that this analysis needs to be updated. This is important because when the analysis was carried out, we were at 26%. So it needs to be updated to include the shallow water areas, but also to include COVID, financial implications of COVID, and how this would change the costing analysis. The costs might change now post-COVID. We've also been working on a governance framework for implementation, and the Cabinet of Ministers recently approved an interim governance framework using the Environment Protection Act with a transition to an independent authority in 2 years. We've also had a Marine Spatial Plan policy developed and endorsed. It's on the MSP website, should be interested to go and have a read about that. Also piloting electronic monitoring on industrial fisheries vessels, per seine and longline, and looking at updating the Seychelles FAD management plan, Fish Aggregation Device Management Plan. We've carried out a socioeconomic impact analysis of the 30% marine protection areas on industrial fisheries, and we're looking to replicate this for tourism, sports and charter fisheries in the coming year. We've also looked at climate risk mapping using sea surface temperature and chlorophyll A, and we've included blue carbon in the Seychelles as nationally determined contributions this year. Ongoing work is also looking at ecosystem services evaluation of the MPAs. We're also developing a management framework for the marine protection areas. The draft has already been submitted, but also developing management plans for the 13 marine protection areas and regulations for these areas that are gazetted. So apologies, what I forgot to mention in this previous slide is the coordinates of these areas have been gazetted, but implementation will start next year in June 2022. We are delayed on implementation, as you can imagine, due to the impacts of COVID and restrictions on meetings. So the hope is to transition to full implementation by June of 2022. So for now, we're working on the management plans and having the regulations for these areas gazetted. We also need to finalize the marine plan document. We haven't done that yet because we need to consider zone 3 and sustainability in the remainder of the 70% of the EZ and finalize an implementation plan document. These are some of the steps that are needed to now transition from a planning phase to implementation. And some of these I've already mentioned before, finalizing the marine plan document, management consideration and allowable activities for zone 3. We would like the plan to go through a public review process, and then the plan needs to be endorsed and gazetted. The implementation plan itself needs to be developed to include governance, the management framework, the management plans, regulations, and monitoring, control, and surveillance. And finally, last but not least, definitely not least, is we need to consider how we would monitor and evaluate the marine spatial plan with developing smart indicators, developing a review process for the MSP in measuring management effectiveness and the reporting requirements of the different agencies. This is my last slide. These are the expected outcomes of the Seychelles Marine Spatial Plan by 2025. By 2025, we want a comprehensive multi-sector marine spatial plan that's implemented. This needs to be updated. My sincere apologies. This should read 2022 onwards. This was the initial target date of 2021. We also want the 30% marine protection areas to be actively managed by 2025, to have a governance mechanism developed that will implement the MSP across the entire exclusive economic zone, to have long-term monitoring for indicators of climate threats that are underway, and a decision-making framework for all future sustainable economic development in the Seychelles. So thank you very much for your attention. Please do not hesitate to also email us if you have any questions and to visit the website. Thank you. And I don't know if we have time for questions, or, but I'll hand it over now to the team. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Elena. I have to say today the level of presentations is impressive. This case is very, very relevant, I think, to how to engage stakeholders. We are seeing, today we've seen what we could say a bottom-up approach where communities organize and self-manage and try to regulate a bit the use of resources from Madagascar and the LMMAs and the different cases that are also happening in other places. And now we see an example of this more like top-down approach where government leads, and there's this huge consultation process, 200 meetings you were mentioning, to plan the whole country. So very impressive. Congratulations on this work. And we indeed have some minutes for questions and clarifying. I don't know if there's somebody that would like to pose the first question to Elena. We have time for 2 or 3 questions. Well, yeah, if no questions, then I would pose one. As you were saying, this is an effort to plan the whole country. So 30%, as you were saying, is already protected. That will be zones 1 and 2, and the rest is also regulated. The rest of the 70%, as you were saying, this is like the planning effort. And the implementation will come at a later stage. And I wonder if there's already a mechanism in place to consult or maintain this relationship with stakeholders, especially fisheries actors on the implementation process. So how this is designed from the process approach?
Yes, thank you, Xavi, for your question. Discussions on implementation are ongoing. So we are already having those discussions. And we actually have a meeting tomorrow afternoon to finalize and agree on the allowable activities and management considerations for each of these areas. For example, do you have one set of regulations for all zone ones, or are some areas significantly different that they will need their own regulations? So these are some of the discussions we're having already. So with regards to the decision-making process and that flow chart that I presented at the beginning, we're using the same level of stakeholder engagement from the planning phase to have these discussions about implementation. There's discussions about co-management, because these are very large scale marine areas. So it won't just be down to one entity to manage, but more of a coordination approach with different entities on the ground, from your coast guards to your maritime safety authority, and then as well as the MPA management units in those particular areas, but also engaging with tourism sector. You have fly fishing camps, for example, in some of the outer islands. So they have a presence there. So they have a role in terms of implementation, control, monitoring, and surveillance. They're already doing a fantastic job with looking at the sustainability of their activities, with limits on their rods, catch and release protocols, and so on. So the idea is not to reinvent the wheel, but to work with these people and just support the amazing work that they're doing already, taking into consideration what they are doing already and if there can be any improvements, and obviously making sure that all these key sectors are at the table when we're having these discussions. For example, in the meeting that we're having tomorrow, there'll be from industrial fisheries sector all the way down to civil society organizations. Due to COVID, we have to have these meetings virtually still. It would have been much easier to have them in person, but we've had to adapt and work around COVID, and we're proceeding with virtual meetings until we can have in-person meetings. But just to reiterate that it's the same level of engagement from zoning to the discussions on implementation. Thanks.
Thanks, Elena, for your answer. And it shows in all cases, and probably our own experience, that unless we take stakeholders on, it's very complicated to make it work. We've got another question from Daisy. Please, the floor is yours. Oh, maybe some problems with connectivity. Daisy?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, now it works.
Yes. No, I was saying it's amazing to see the strides made in terms of marine protection and conservation. But I just wanted to ask, because I see these areas have been declared, does the legislation in your country not stipulate when you have to develop management plans for these areas? And I'm asking this because our legislation requires us to develop management plans within 12 months of declaration of marine protected areas. And also in terms of regulations, so I see, you know, they don't, the declaration doesn't accompany, it's not accompanied by regulations. So what I want to ask is, does it not sort of open it up to the risk of them being paper parks? Because I think I heard mention of, you know, you want implementation to start only in 2025. So I'm just wondering, in between, what will be happening? Thank you.
Thanks for your question, Daisy.
Thank you, Daisy, for your question. So just to clarify, implementation was to start in 2021. The milestone 3 in the debt swap loan agreement was December of 2020, with the transition to implementation in 2021. So we were ahead of that milestone. The areas were gazetted in March instead of December. So just to clarify that due to COVID, we are delayed. And a blessing in disguise to your first question is that no, there is no time period in our legislation to have these regulations in force. However, yes, I understand your concern regarding paper parks, but it's written in the debt swap loan agreement that these areas should be implemented. So there's that drive. And we have no intention whatsoever to have these as paper parks. But following this transparent decision-making process, we wanted the stakeholders to be engaged when we transitioned from the allowable activities that had been agreed for each of these areas, their management considerations, and then transferring those to regulations and management plans. And that's what we're doing right now. When we say implementation also, sometimes it's important to consider what that means. We've already, in a way, started implementation with the drafting of these frameworks and management plans. We already have management plans for 5 of these areas. And what we need to do now is transfer these to regulations. Ideally, we should have the government of Seychelles on this call to clarify some of these questions, but one of the setbacks is there is a new act called the Nature Reserves and Conservancy Bill, which is an update of the 1969 legislation we've used to gazette these areas, and we're waiting for this bill to pass to have these regulations under this new act. And because of the coronavirus pandemic, the National Assembly was not meeting, and we have not been able to have this bill passed. Once this bill is passed, it will be faster to have the regulations gazetted, but they will already have been drafted and ready to go. So I hope I've clarified your question. So implementation 2022 onwards, not 2025. We don't have a time period for developing management plans and regulations. But even if we did, I think there would have been a consideration of the impacts of COVID, and we most likely would have had that consideration for an extension to transition to implementation, and that we're developing the management plans and regulations as we speak. Thank you.
Thanks, Elena. Thanks for these questions and answers. There's a last question. We would need to move forward, but Arthur is asking what plans have been put in place to build human and technical capacity to manage the expanded coverage. I don't know, Elena, if you could provide a short answer to this. And thanks, Arthur, for the question. Yeah.
Thank you. While we were delayed, well, we were not delayed, while we had these meeting restrictions and we couldn't meet to push the other work that required stakeholder engagement, we worked very hard to secure financing to transition to implementation. And with SECAT, Government of Seychelles, and TNC, we've managed to secure just about $5 million to help this transition to implementation. And some of the activities that are included in these grants is a full capacity gap analysis of implementing parties on the ground, and then based on this gap analysis, training to support and develop the capacity that will be required for implementation. So the funding is secured, and this work should be starting shortly. We couldn't do it before because we hadn't finalized the MSP, so we didn't know where the areas were, so we wouldn't know who these key players would be. Now that we do, and we can then now hopefully have these trainings, COVID-19 restrictions permitted, then we will do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Elena, for the short answer. And I guess this is one of a kind, the case of Seychelles. Thanks for sharing this with us today. Again, on the discussion session, we may be going into details on how this can inspire maybe other cases in the region. Now I would like to move forward and give the floor to Anita Tullbrod, Director of Kosterhavet National Park in Sweden. Also a very, very interesting case on how to engage stakeholders and try to find the common ground with different users when we are talking about designation of protected areas and management. So thanks, Anita, in advance for sharing your screen. It's working nicely, and the floor is yours. Thanks for being with us today. I think you need to activate your microphone.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
I thought so. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can see the editing mode, and now, yeah, it moved into presentation mode. Thank you.
Yeah, and you hear me as well.
Sure. Yeah.
That's good. Well, thank you. I'm Anita Tullrut, and I work as a marine nature conservation manager for Kosterhavet National Park in Sweden. And it's the County Administrative Board of Västra Götaland that is my home for this work. So I will concentrate on how we have involved the stakeholders towards the state as a national park, but also make an example of how we managed together with the stakeholders today. I'm talking about a national park on the west coast of Sweden, and it's bordering Norway. It's not that big as the Seychelles. It's 400 square kilometers. And the aim is to conserve the distinctive and species-rich marine environment and the archipelago area, as well as adjacent land areas in an essentially unchanged condition. 98% of the national park is marine and marine biotopes, but we should also take care of the land areas. And this park was inaugurated 12 years ago in 2009. The aim also includes naturally to protect and conserve the marine ecosystems, but also ensuring that a sustainable use can take place of the resources in the area. It also contains to conserve the nature and land and cultural values, to facilitate and for visitors to get experience and gain knowledge about the values and sustainable use, and to promote research and education on conservation and sustainable use. It took quite a long time to establish this park. In 1979, the discussion about protection started, and 1989 there was a suggestion from the national authority that this area would be a nicely national park. But at that time there were big protests, especially from the fishermen. So the authority didn't go on with this task at that time. And then 97 there were compilation of the and analysis of the biological values, and 99 the researchers working in the area did a big ROV survey with this underwater camera and got a lot of information that they shared with the stakeholders, especially with the fishermen. So in 2000 there was an agreement, it's called the Koster Agreement, agreement of protection of the sensitive areas against trawl fishery. And at that time this area also got a Natura 2000 protection. Then another thing that was important was that in 2004 there was something that's called a co-management initiative. It concerned fishing in Sweden, and some areas got this trial to try to co-management with local stakeholders. And in this initiative we got some training, and I will come back to that. And then finally after some documentation and so on that I will talk about, the national park was inaugurated in 2009. So, as I mentioned, the regulation of the fisheries was in a separate process that we call the Coastal Agreement in year 2000. And at that time, there were 20 trawlers that were active in this area. And as you can see on the map, you see in the green borders of the national park, you can see the dark blue areas which is deeper than 60 meters and allowed for shrimp trawling. And at this time, the gears were restricted to small trawlers and less heavy trawl board. And there was obligation to have a grid, a selective grid in the trawl that select for everything else but the shrimps. So bycatch and fishes and so on goes out from the trawl. And 6 areas were protected from the trawling in this areas where it's deeper than 60 meter. And when the national park was inaugurated, this rules for the fishing was not altered, but it was incorporated in the national park. 2004, I mentioned there was a training program, and this was a training program for fishermen in marine ecology for 4 days at Gothenburg University. And this increased the knowledge of the marine ecosystem in the area and in the fishery biology for the fishermen. And at the first of this training activities, the fishermen said that, oh, but you don't know how we fish, so you have to learn that as well. So after that, there were also training for scientists, manager, and politicians in fisheries. And that was the local fishermen that had that course. And this, of course, increased the knowledge of the fishery and how it worked and how they thought about things. And both these training programs contributed, of course, to the better understanding between fishermen and researchers and administrators and politicians. And this, I think, also created trust between both researchers, authorities, and fishermen. So when the managed plant were being established or developed, there were a parallel process of biological documentation for a couple of years that with the inventory for biotopes and species and of special values, for example, the coral reefs marked with yellow and green dots in the map. And there were suggestions for the national park border. And parallel to this, there were also a big participation process. And it started already in 2005 and through the entire process to the establishment of the park. There was a lot of meetings, there were working groups, there were referrals with the suggestions, and there were a lot of information folders that were sent out to every neighbor in the area. And the picture here shows a workshop with fishermen and me sitting on the floor. And we worked, we used the open standards method when we worked with the management plan, when we developed it. And I will come back to that a little bit. So the working steps of the management plan was that we were a preparation core team that compilated all the biological information and other information. Then we have a reference group meeting. We had a workshop in the open standard methods where we made a draft management plan, and we made a compilation both from all the ideas from the reference group meeting and from the workshop. Then we presented that at the reference group meeting number 2. After that, there were a proposal and a public hearing, and finally a decision by SIPA in August 2009. The stakeholders that were invited to the reference group meeting were authorities, both from Sweden and Norway, local fishermen organization, the local aquaculture, the tourism organization, the local hunting organization, several NGOs, and boating organization, both from Sweden and Norway, because we have a lot of Norwegian boating tourists in the area, and of course also the inhabitants living in and around the area. At the reference group meeting number 1, people sat in smaller groups and gave us the opinion on their vision for the Kosterhavet National Park in 20-30 years time, and also suggestions on goals, how goals to work towards, and suggestions of how to reach the goals. And the workshop, we used the open standard methods, which is a method for adaptive management. And this ended up in a draft management plan with the results structured in results in a very structured way, where we identify the targets. For example, here, the coral reefs. We identify the goals for the targets, that we wanted live coral reefs. We identified the human uses and their effects, for example, local fishing with trawlers. And we also identified other objectives for the human use. And then identify strategies and activities how to reach the goals and objectives. At reference group meeting number 2, we agreed on the goals for the nature conservation, the objectives for the human use, and the activities necessary to reach the goals and objectives. And we also agreed about the restrictions on human use. So the management plan contains the goals for the nature, objectives for human use, actions to reach goals and objectives, monitoring, because this is of course very crucial to be able to have an adaptive management. And all these was also in consideration of EU directives and international conventions, of course. The conservation targets is big ecosystems. It's soft and deep, hard and soft bottoms. And it's also special values as the coral reef I mentioned, birds and seals, fish and crustaceans. And the difference between shallow and deep bottoms here goes with 30 meters, not 200 meters as in the Seychelles. We don't have, the area is about 200 meters deep at 240 at the deepest, but here we have we divided 30 meters because the sun, the light goes down to 30 meters in this area. And the objectives for the human use, it's objectives for the tourism, recreation, the fishing, the shipping, the research and the hunting we have in the area. And example of the goals for the cold water coral reefs is that we want to preserve the dead and live reefs of this coral that's called Lophelia pertusa, and the number of species on the reefs, the biodiversity on the reefs. And what actions do we need for that? Well, we have to have no trawling and no anchoring on the reef sites, both on the dead and living reefs. And we want to try to restore the reefs. And the monitoring, of course, area of living and dead coral reefs. Example of human use is the sustainable fishing. And the objective is that the fishery will carry on in a sustainable way and with consideration of the biodiversity in the area. And that means that we have to develop the gear to less harmful, continue to develop it. We also want to continue the dialogue, the training for the fishermen and for the scientists, administration, politicians. And there is a lot of other goals and objectives. But I have no time to tell you all about it. And the monitoring, of course, the fish and shrimps population, but also the evaluation of the trawl protected areas. And in 2012 to 13, we monitored these special trawl protected areas. If you remember the red dots on the map, it was a survey that was done by the Gothenburg University. They used these ROV cameras and film transects, and they also use sonar in and outside protected areas to see if there is still high biodiversity in the protected areas. And the results was that there were more species reaching in the protected areas compared to the trawled areas. And they developed a living coral reef at one of in one of these protected areas. Earlier, it has been just dead, but still with this three-dimensional cultural structure as a remain. And now there were living corals attached to this skeleton in the middle of the protected area. But they also discovered with a sonar that there were trawl tracks in 4 out of 6 of these protected areas. So with this result, we went to the fishermen and asked them, what do we do now? How can we alter this? And with we still have this group of fishermen and people, authorities and the municipalities in this co-management initiative. It's our consultant group for the national park. We meet several times a year, and now we sat together with them and discussed what to do with this trawling in the protected areas. So the fishermen suggested alteration of the regulations, and we suggested 5 more areas to protect because there was still high biodiversity in those protected areas. And this is an example how we use the pure research to get knowledge and also discuss with the practitioners how we can manage and develop the management for a better protection in the area. And the actions we agreed on was that altered the regulation, and it was altered in July 2015. Now the fishermen have to have a special permit to trawl for shrimps in the area. They have to have an education about the protection value and about the rules. They also have to have an automatic identification system, an AIS, so that the authorities can follow every boat where they are exactly. And they are just allowed to fish 3 days a week, between 5 and 20 on the day. And we also protected 5 more areas. So now we have in this area, we also have we have the Kosterhavet National Park on the top, and then at the south we have in the map we have a nature reserve that was established 2011. And for all this area, we have 11 protected, special protected areas within the trawl areas, and all the light blue areas is not allowed for trawling as well. So we have a zoning even in this area, and we try to manage this adaptively. The aim is to conserve the biodiversity in the area, but it's also to make this possible for a sustainable use. So we have goals and objectives for the nature and for the human use. We have actions and regulations. We have a monitoring, and we do an evaluation and discuss. Can we keep the actions and rules, or do we need to change? And I just gave you an example that we needed to change the rules for the fishing about the trawl fishing. So we are using this cycle for everything in the park, and yeah. So I think I have to stop there, and it's okay to ask me questions now.
Thanks, Anita, for this presentation. I think at least a couple of ingredients were highly relevant to how to engage stakeholders. I love how you put it when you were training fishermen, and then fishermen said, well, we need to train you too, because you don't know exactly what we're talking about. So engaging stakeholders is very much related to talking and making sure that we have the same level conversation. So excellent. I wonder if we have one quick question, clarifying question. If not, then in the interest of time, I would propose to move into the discussion. Yeah, because we should be finishing in 45 minutes, and we wanted to offer you an opportunity to discuss a bit in deep what we heard today and how this can be used. There's no questions coming on the chat box, or nobody's raising hands that I see. Then thanks Anita, and I'm sure more details will come up on the discussion part. Thanks for being here today with us. And
okay, thank you.
Yeah, I would like to pass it on to Annette. Also, we said it would be nice to take a screenshot.
Yes.
I wonder if this could be the right moment when everybody, just for a few seconds, could turn on their videos. So we have our faces, and really quickly we can take a picture to remember that we were here today and we had a good time hearing these interesting cases. So I see camera feeds are turning up. Yeah, there's some more coming in. Fantastic. It'll be quick. And I guess Anna and Annette, would you be taking screenshots?
Give us a few moments. Just keep the cameras on briefly.
And a big smile.
We have a lot of participants today, which is great.
We need to take some pictures in sequence. Eh? So,
yes.
Thanks, Annette.
Okay, I think. And have you taken?
Yes, I was able to take some.
Perfect.
Okay. So then, Annette, the floor is yours for the discussion session. I forgot to introduce ourselves, but Annette and myself, we work for SwAM. It's an organization helping teams all over the different areas, and to try to do adaptive management with the aim of better conservation. So Annette, the floor is yours, and I think you will share your screen now and introduce us to the little exercise.
I will do that. Thanks, Xavi. So I am now in the PowerPoint presentation, and I believe that we will share the link to this with you in the chat box now. So what we were thinking we could do to kick off a discussion around this topic is that we have created a couple of questions here. If you use the link to go into the PowerPoint and go to slide 11, you can see these, or you can just look at my screen. So we have come up with 3 questions to kind of spark some discussion. The first question goes, what, now that you have listened to these 3 presentations and reflecting on these cases, and I'm sure you have your own thoughts, what do you see as a key to ensure solid participatory approach and buy-in by the relevant stakeholders when designating MPAs? Second question goes, which approaches from these case studies that you've just heard about could be adapted to the reality in your own country or site to enable or improve the stakeholder engagement? So as an example here, what can we adapt or learn from the LMMA approach that would be useful for the work that national agencies do? And there are other similar questions here. And the last one on how to bring stakeholders and previously established MPAs on board to create this collaboration and buy-in that we really are looking for to ensure good and effective management. So what we can do now is that you can go in on these different slides, 12, 13, and 14. We have a question on each, and we have some post-it notes in here. So you can go in there and you can just clicking on a post-it, and you can type in your thought, answer to the question, other thoughts, ideas, issues you can think of that you would like to voice. You can also raise your hand, unmute yourself and speak up, and we can also use the chat box and enter information for you. So we'll give you a few minutes to have a think and begin to enter in some answers in these different slides. Are there any questions to this? Nope. Go ahead.
The document should be accessible to everyone. In case it's not and you're experiencing problems, put your comments in the chat box, but it should be available to everybody.
So there's some access denied, Xavi?
Yeah, I could not access through the link.
Okay.
Is that a beautiful bird we have making some noises here? Is helping any? Have we got the access?
I'm having to provide access to everybody individually, so bear with me and refresh. There's something the system today is not helping us with, but you should be having access.
Meanwhile, if you want to type in your comments in the chat, and we can and feel free to also just talk.
Bwana amekosea. Wewe uliweka nani?
Does anyone have thoughts on any of the questions? We have a couple of comments here on the first question about the key for solid participatory approach is continued long-term participation. And another one, let it take time. Which I believe is also what has come out from the presentations we have heard of not just engaging stakeholders at a few moments in the process, but bring them in from the beginning and have stakeholders involved all the way through from the planning to the implementation phase. And yes, that can take time. I see more people entering the presentation now, which is great.
Everybody should have access at this point. If not, please send me a share request. I will activate you.
So we have comments coming in here now. Developing trust between the stakeholders is very important. Being clear about roles and responsibilities. An honest commitment to the process.
And then we've got somebody raising hand.
Yeah, Techno, go ahead. Feel free to unmute yourself and there's still some access issues as well, Xavi.
Okay, into it.
If you cannot unmute yourself, then go ahead and type in the chat box. There we go. We can hear you now. So we're getting lots of comments for this first question in here now, which is fantastic. And we have a couple of sort of topics that go through here, getting the stakeholders engaged throughout the process. There's a topic on trust and building a relationship that will help create the buy-in, having clear roles. There's a topic on education, I think, as we just heard from Anita's presentation as well, making sure everybody understands the situation from all perspectives. I think that's fantastic. Yep. Continuous research and information sharing. So related to the monitoring as well, tracking the situation and keeping all stakeholders involved and engaged. And as Anita said, when you see the trend of the situation, then involve stakeholders and say, this is what is happening. What do we do about that? How do we improve the situation if that is needed? Making sure, identifying all the key stakeholders. I think we have a lot of good comments here for this first question. Does anyone want to talk to any of them? If not, then I suggest we move on. And you can continue to enter notes on the question 1 if you want to do that. I'm gonna move it to slide 13 and have a look at question number 2 as well, of which approaches from the case studies that you just heard about could be adapted to the reality in your country or your site to enable or improve the stakeholder engagement. Have you heard about something from these 3 case studies that you think, that's a really good idea, with some slight adjustment that could be something that could be implemented in my world that would help us? Any thoughts on question 2? So I see comments here on the importance of setting clear objectives for MPAs and through the marine spatial planning for example, for biodiversity objectives. I think Anita explained very well about that, and then how you follow up and you do ongoing monitoring. And you can see if you are getting to where you want to get, and you can then really bring in the stakeholders to work on how to adapt the plans so you get the best outcomes. I think that's a really good point. Thoughts here on the value of training across stakeholders that we heard as well. Sounds like that's something that can be taken and used in other sites. The whole LMMA approach. Have you heard from Madagascar? If any of you want to specify in your comments of where you think what's your setting and where would the different approaches be really useful, free to do that.
Peter is raising his hand.
Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, maybe just have some reflections that it's I think of this, that you need a very strong core team for each geographical area that you decide to work in. And I think also that you need this commitment, so you find the right people that you know that they will keep on and set realistic objectives, and then you have to realize the time it takes to organize all these training opportunities. And then, of course, if you go to a remote area, it will be more difficult and so on. So I think it's yes, a reflection from me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very good point. We've heard from all three case studies here that there has been definitely as you say it, Peter, a strong team behind it who can drive the process and facilitate bringing all the stakeholders together. So we have a lot of thoughts around the use of LMMAs.
Yeah, and there may be other ideas that were shared today in the cases that can be transferable to our realities. LMMA is just one of the examples.
Yeah.
I wonder about these setting up the same understanding and the different tools that were discussed today, from participatory process, from consultation to sharing folders around the community to make sure that we have the same understanding to actual trainings. There's quite a few ideas around here that can be considered to facilitate this process of engagement.
Do anyone wanna talk to any of these points? Feel free to unmute and speak. There's a comment here that says that all approaches are adapted if they have local based ownership. So really pointing out the need to have local communities in on the process, whatever you do. It's a good point. And I'm just moving to slide 14 and question number 3, how to bring stakeholders and previously established MPAs on board to create collaboration and buy-in and ensure good and effective management. And we already have some comments here as well of how thoughts on how that works the best. And we have comments on raising the awareness and doing education. And increasing the access and use of resources and visitation by stakeholders, making things transparent. That's a good comment here on learning from previously established MPA. It's good, as it gives lots of practical examples that can be used. Which is, I think, linked to the one we have on exchange programs for stakeholders. So really, I think we had comments from the speakers and that as well, and creating these networks and opportunities for sharing. And there's some comments on facilitators, neutral facilitators, and using facilitators that had good people skills to bring in and engage the stakeholders to establish that trust that we heard about earlier that is needed. Anyone want to talk to any of this? Ulrika, go ahead.
Sorry, I had to drop out a little bit here for another meeting, so I haven't really participated all the time. But I just wanted to raise the issue, and I don't know how that's been discussed so far, but the issue of really understanding who needs to be involved in these processes when it comes to fishing, for example, to really be how do you map who's actually using the area at the moment, and if there are any formal or informal tenure systems in place, and also to be aware of migrant fishers, so who might be coming into the area seasonally, and really to have an awareness of this, and also be able to build these LMA structures and dialogues on this type of mapping. So just to make that point, I don't know if it's something that's already been raised.
Yeah, thanks Ulrika. I think it hasn't been discussed here, but it has been mentioned in several of the presentations, I believe, the process of identifying all the stakeholders and bringing them into the process. But I don't know if any of the presenters have any thoughts on this and how this particular part of the process.
I can just add that, I mean, that's clearly one of the key kind of issues you can see with some of MPAs is that that when there are villages who are kind of have to move their fishing effort further away than they have been able to before. That's really one of the key issues, that the displacement of their fishing effort due to fishing regulations. So that's why I brought it up.
Yeah. Any thoughts on that? Okay. I think we have a lot of good thoughts here. And we had some fantastic presentations that covered a lot of topics on stakeholder engagement and the processes. We will, we will tidy this up, and we will share this back with you all after.
Yes, yes, indeed. We need to see what are the repetitions, and also make sure that we capture everything on the chat box. So we will go through the log and make sure that we have all the ideas captured. So we will reorganize a bit and make it a bit cleaner, and then share it with all the documents that we've been presenting today, the different speakers have presented today. In case you are not sure that you shared your email with us because of the invitation was resent or something, please feel free to put your email address on the chat box before we finish. So we will have everything recorded and we can complete the distribution list after the seminar. Thanks in advance.
Yeah.
So Annette, what do you think?
I think that we have got a lot of stuff here. It's very good to get all this feedback. I think maybe we wrap up this piece now and move on.
Okay. Okay. You're sharing your screen. Would you mind, or no? You're not.
I stopped it.
I will be sharing my screen in a second. And I would like to first of all thank everybody for the incredible participation today, especially the speakers. Obviously, as I was saying before, I think we had a very, very impressive set of presentations today, with at least in my opinion, very inspiring thoughts and good practices that we can. I don't know if copy in our regions, but maybe they can help us as source of inspiration, and they can leave us and help us find maybe solutions to the situations we are facing when we need to interact with stakeholders and make sure that they are in it with us, so we can at least maintain the level of resources and the systems, the ecosystem services and the systems are giving us. So before closing, I wanted to just briefly tell you that if you want to know more, or there's another seminar session that will be addressing one of the other challenges that we identified with the Outlook report, that it's how to make plans operational and how to turn them into action, especially work plans and monitoring plans. This will happen in October. Ideally, last week we need to confirm the date, and this will be shared with you as soon as we have it set. You also have some other sources of information in case you are interested into diving more into adaptive management and how to what are the tools available, what can be done. There's a website, conservation standards, and also there was this presentation shared with you on the first seminar in June. Maybe some of you did not attend. You have the link here. Again, we will share this presentation with all of you in a few hours when we clean up and can arrange everything in it. So that will be one of the conclusion. Also, we would like to hear your thoughts about how the session went. And for this, I would ask you to quickly, there's a really, really short poll. It's based on it's just 6 questions. If you could give us your feedback on how the session went, if it was interesting for you or not, if you would be interested in participating in other meetings like today. You should be seeing a little screen now with the option to vote. Please feel free to do so while we are doing the closing and until we finish the meeting today. So we don't need to do it online. Just feel free to vote, express your thoughts about how this session was organized. Also, to make sure that you have our contacts with Yanni, part of the SwAM team, and myself, we are available for further thoughts and details on this. And yeah, at this point, I guess I would pass it on to Yanni for a few final words today. Yanni from the SwAM team and the Ocean team. Thanks, Yanni.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, perfect. Well, I also just want to thank you all very much for participating and also for all the good examples that you showed. I agree with you, Xavier, that they are really inspiring and you feel like really taking part in this future work. And I don't know, I didn't present myself in the beginning, but I work together with Peter at SwAM, the Swedish Agency for Marine and Water Management, with the MPA process within the SwAM Ocean program that we have in the bioregion. And from the behalf of SwAM, we also think that strong participation is one of the major key factors to success. To have those people living by the sea, living of the sea, to also take an active part in protecting the sea and make sure that the marine resources are used in a sustainable way that we all want and are after for. But as was also said in the discussion, participation does take time, and time is a tough challenge, but we need to start somewhere and we need to start now. It's really time for action. And at SwAM, we will support some teams in the wire more in depth now. We will have another seminar, as Xavier was mentioning, in October, but we would also work a bit more in depth with workshops. But we think at SwAM that this is a long-term thing. We are right now trying to make this program, or in another form or this form, to make it stronger and larger and for a longer term in the future. So if we can't work with your team right now, I want to emphasize that we think that we can do that more in the future, because we think this, with working with framework that can be used at different scales, at different levels, is a crucial thing to build up from maybe one individual MPA to a country MPAs and scale it up and down within the region at different levels. So yeah, I want to thank you all for participating today, and I hope we can have some more collaboration in the future. So a big thanks. And just Xavier showed my email, just write if you have any further thoughts or questions that we didn't bring up now. So a large thank you.
Okay, thanks, Yanni. And I think unless there's any other thoughts or somebody willing to say final words, I'm seeing all your emails in the chat box, so we will be sending these presentations and the details as we said in probably tomorrow, if all goes okay, if not in just a few days. We hope it was interesting. Please feel free to share your thoughts on the evaluation. You have the little screen ongoing, and I guess yeah, we can call it once. We're finishing a bit earlier than expected. That's not the usual thing, but we hope you have a good day, good continuation today, and yeah, thanks everyone. We'll see you next time.
Okay,
Goodbye.
thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a nice day. Unalibu tatu Musa.